Looking back, we can always do things better, but going on your very first cruise, certainly there's always opportunities as you cruise more often to look back and think, what would I have done differently in that scenario now that I know what I know? One of our newest writers at RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com had never been on a cruise before, ever. And this was an interesting perspective because we got a first-time cruiser who could look and reference everything we've talked about here and then base on their first cruise. But when Calista went on her very first Royal Caribbean cruise, she came up with a list of 11 things that she wished she knew before she ever went on her first cruise. We've got the list up next. Hey everyone, it's Matt from RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com. I like to say here that you can only be a first-time cruiser, well, once, right? And when you go on your very first cruise, no matter how much research you do, how many secrets you read, how many YouTube videos you watch, inevitably you're probably going to do something that you might regret, or maybe not regret at the time, but in retrospect, as you cruise more, look back on it and say, oh man, I really wish I'd done that differently. And when Calista tried her very first cruise, we wanted her to be able to essentially make her own mistakes, but also at least, do a little bit of research, right? So she didn't go into it completely blind, but I also didn't want to give her every single tip and trick in the book. I wanted her to kind of discover things on her own and kind of read what we had at RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com. It's a good way to kind of also self-check what we have here. But she went on Wonder of the Seas for her very first sailing. And there are pros and cons of picking a brand new ship, a big ship versus a small, older ship. That's a different video for a different day. But we have 11 insights that Calista shared with us about things that she wished she had done differently when she went on her very first Royal Caribbean cruise just a couple months ago. The first thing that Calista wished she had done differently is that if she didn't like a show or entertainment, that she should have just gotten up and left. Something that's easy to grasp as you start cruising is how important entertainment is. Essentially, when you're on a cruise ship, there's a lot happening, right? There's going to be comedy shows, there's going to be dance parties, there's going to be performances in the theater, and there's a lot of things happening. And a lot of that is also contending for your time. You're only in your cruise for, in Calista's case, 7 nights, and there's only opportunities to see some things. On an Oasis-class ship, there's multiple activities happening at the same time, and Calista felt that, if she had gone to a show or an entertainment venue and wanted to start seeing something, and it didn't quite jive with her, that she should have just left instead of committing to it because she felt like, well, I'm already here, I might as well see it. As an example, she went to go see the very talented Voices show, which is an a cappella group, but it just wasn't her style. According to Calista, the unfamiliar music just made her felt miserable by the fact that she could smell a man's shoeless, stinky feet next to her. That's a whole different issue, not related to the show, obviously. With any show you're going to, there's always the opportunity to leave if you so choose. I think maybe the comedy show is a little more difficult because sometimes the comedians point out that you're leaving, but in general, you should feel free that if you're not enjoying a show for whatever reason, there's no harm in getting up and leaving because at the end of the day, this is your vacation. You spend it the way you want to spend it. So don't feel like just because you committed to booking a reservation for Mamma Mia or going to the Schooner Bar that you must stay there for the entire set out of some sort of obligation that you feel from it. It's your cruise fare, it's your cruise time, and you want to make the most of it. So, if you're not loving it, feel free to get up and try something else. Number 2 is you don't have to watch the balloon drop from below, and Calista actually stumbled upon this one by accident. Now, on the very first night of a cruise, typically the longer cruises especially, there's going to be a balloon drop on the Royal Promenade. It looks pretty cool about it, actually. But one of the downsides of this balloon drop, even though it's held at midnight, is that a lot of people want to go there. It's a big party, a big crowd, right? And Calista actually discovered by accident that she could watch the balloons fall from another location. She wished she thought about going to a different location to watch the balloon drop. As an example, you can watch it on an Oasis-class ship from deck 6, which is where the schooner bar is, a little more elevated, a little further away. And also from Central Park, there are windows from Central Park that look down onto the Royal Promenade. So if you're scared of loud noises, or allergic to balloons, or you just want to get away from all those people, there are still ways to experience events without being in the center of everything. Number 3 on Calista's list is keep all essentials in your carry-on. And Calista admitted that she read about this tip before the cruise, but didn't do it herself, and she regretted it. In fact, she called it one of her biggest regrets. Before your cruise, you'll pack a smaller carry-on bag and a bigger piece of luggage, much like an airplane. Since you'll leave a bigger piece of luggage with the porters, it's important to pack all of your essentials and valuables in your carry-on. Now, Calista thought this tip was about in case your luggage got lost, like for clothing and whatnot. So she did pack valuables in her carry-on, but left medicine and other essentials in a larger bag. On embarkation day, she got on the ship about 12:30 p.m. and could access the cabin around 2 p.m., but she did not receive her larger bags until 4 o'clock. During that gap of time, she wished she had packed more toiletries and maybe even a change of clothes in her carry-on. You never want to be stuck waiting around for your bag to arrive. The number 4 regret of taking your very first cruise is being in a cabin that's at the very front of the cruise ship. As a first-time cruiser, it's always difficult to know what will bother you, including if you'll get seasick on a cruise. In Calista's case, she did not expect to feel as much motion sickness as she did on her very first cruise. She actually said that prior to cruising, she never really struggled with motion sickness before, so she didn't expect to get seasick on a cruise. However, as soon as Wonder of the Seas began to set sail, she felt nauseous and unsteady. This was aggravated by the fact that she had gotten a forward cabin through the guaranteed stateroom process. In this situation, she had booked a guarantee cabin in which Royal Caribbean selects the exact location. The advantage of booking a guarantee cabin is it will save you money. Royal Caribbean says for a slightly less price, you will pick the cabin for you and you'll get a better discount. Well, in this situation, she got a room that was all the way forward. And she found that the seasickness was worse at the very front of the ship. Now, luckily, she had read one of the tips to bring Dramamine with her, so that helped with the situation. But this was a lesson that she's now learned since then to not book cabins all the way at the very front of the ship. Number 5 is 7 days felt like a long cruise to her. On Wonder of the Seas, she was on a 7-night cruise, but by days 5 and 6, which were sea days, she felt herself getting a little claustrophobic. The ocean started to feel inescapable, and she really missed her own bed. Being on a cruise feels unique because you can't leave until the ship is at port. Now, luckily, Wonder of the Seas is such a vast ship that 7 days hardly felt like enough time to explore it. And she was able to minimize the cabin fever by investigating new areas on board. However, in the future, especially on smaller ships, Calista said that she would regret doing anything that was longer than about 4 or 5 days. Another regret Calista had was not bringing enough cash, even though there are opportunities to get cash on board your ship. Now, Calista knew that there are going to be opportunities in which you need cash on hand. As an example, you need cash for porters at the cruise terminal, or for tour guides on your shore excursions, or of course in an emergency at one of your ports, maybe a credit card isn't available for you. Now, Calista doesn't usually carry cash, and I can relate to this. I don't usually carry that much cash with me anyway in my usual run-of-the-mill days here on land. So Calista had to run to an ATM before she went to a cruise, and she didn't realize, though, that there would be an ATM on board, so there wasn't necessarily a need to panic in that sense. Either way, having cash was useful. She was still able to tip the porters and, of course, purchase some souvenirs along the way. So I guess in that respect, don't feel like you need to get every single dollar in hand before your cruise begins. There are opportunities to get cash once on board. Another regret that Calista had was not bringing the broadest possible range of outfits. Now, Calista tried to plan ahead as best she could when it comes to packing, and I can relate to this and I can commiserate with this because packing for a cruise can be a challenge because in Calista's case, she didn't foresee the sheer amount of activities that she would have access to. So if Calista could do it all over again, she said she would have packed outfits for activities like laser tag, ice skating, biking, water parks, and more. One of the best packing decisions she made was to bring every single swimsuit that she owned. She used all of them and even actually bought a new one in St. Martin. In addition to needing a swimsuit every day, she sometimes went to the beach at noon and the hot tub at night, requiring 2 different swimsuits. Now, she probably could have not packed for every event, but her advice would be to bring as many different outfits as possible. And I kind of relate to this. There's often that debate of overpacking or not, right? And while overpacking is not ideal because it's just extra heft and weight, in the grand scheme of things, I prefer to overpack. Number 1, cruise ships don't charge you overage fees for your bags being heavy like airlines do. And number 2, piggybacking on Callista's point, it's better to have more choices than you need than not enough. Another regret Calista had was not realizing how much more extras there would be in terms of cost on a cruise. Now, there's a lot that's included in the base fare, and the base fare includes meals in the main dining room, Windjammer, Solarium Bistro, and grab-and-go spots like Park Cafe, and Cafe Promenade, and of course Sorrento's Pizza. But in the end, some of her favorite meals were included in the base fare, like of course the Windjammer's beef stew and cheesecake in the main dining room. However, she also learned that extra features would add up quickly once you set foot on board. For example, she didn't have a drink package, and she didn't have any diamond drinks. This was her very first cruise. So she ended up paying $16 to $17 for every single time she ordered an alcoholic drink, and that adds up to the bar bill. Now, Calista could have bought a drink package, certainly, or maybe budgeted more appropriately, save some more money, to have for a bar tab, if you will. Either way, it does add up quickly, and this is one of the things when I first started cruising I didn't like as well. I remember at the end of every cruise, almost dreading that end of the cruise bill. So one advantage of buying a drink package is you can, of course, budget more appropriately, be able to pre-purchase before the sailing, and have less of a giant bill at the end of your cruise. Another regret Calista had about her very first cruise was assuming the dress codes were more stringent, especially for non-dinner meals. Now, before her very first cruise, Calista knew about dress codes, especially for theme nights like formal night or dress your best, and she chose not to particularly prepare for them while packing other than bringing a few nice dresses. On her cruise, she saw many people following the day's dress code. Cruisers wore fancy dresses and suits on formal night and dress your best night, and she saw many Hawaiian shirts on Caribbean night. However, most themed outfits seem to only be at dinner time and for photos. At events after dinner and into the night, a lot of people ended up slipping back into their more casual, beachy attire worn for the majority of the cruise. Another regret Calista had was not bringing enough snacks to help also save money and be well fed in the room. Now, there's plenty of food on board a Royal Caribbean ship, but there's actually some really good tips out there about packing snacks for your room. Now, I actually use this for my kids, but this applies to adults just as much, because having something to eat at night or in between meals without spending the money for room service, or of course dragging yourself out of your cabin to go find a snack, is a nice benefit of it. So Calista says she only wished that she brought more snacks because it was really helpful and convenient to be able to snack throughout the day. Now, to be clear, there are opportunities to snack on a Royal Caribbean ship. I don't want to make it seem like there isn't food available, but sometimes you might be in the mood for Pringles or Taki chips or your favorite bar of chocolate. In any case, having those things readily available, exactly what you want in your cabin, is a nice option, and you are allowed to bring prepackaged snacks on your cruise. And the last thing Calista wished that she knew before her very first cruise was that the food included in the fare tastes just as good as the specialty restaurants. Some of her favorite meals on her very first cruise on Wonder of the Seas were like lunches in the Windjammer, main dining room dinners, and the complimentary coffee. She reserved dinner at 3 specialty restaurants to compare: Izumi Hibachi, Wonderland, and the Mason Jar. And she had a wonderful dining experience at all those restaurants, and she found the quality of food was very similar to the meals included in the fare. For example, Mason Jar's offerings tasted a lot like the Windjammer's food, but obviously with a different cuisine, matching the Southern American theme and enhanced by the decorations and plating. And while she appreciated the experience at specialty restaurants, she wouldn't necessarily call it a must-have, and the free food was certainly more than adequate. So there you have a look at 11 things that a first-time cruiser wished that she knew before setting foot on a cruise ship. Let me know in the comments below, what are some things that you wish you knew before ever going on your very first Royal Caribbean cruise? I'm looking forward to reading those comments down there below. While you're below our video, hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications. That way, YouTube lets you know we have a brand new video to share. This has been Matt from RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com, and we'll talk again real soon.